Podcast City Network.
Welcome. This is the Rip Griffin Show podcast, a baseball podcast for baseball fans of all ages. Now, here's your host, Rip Griffin.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Rip Griffin Show. This is going to be episode number 76. As we get closer to opening day, I've got a couple guys joining me from Overtime Heroics, Stephen Leonardi and Ben Abel. Ben, Stephen, how you guys doing tonight?
Doing great, Jeff. Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
definitely
absolutely.
Excited to be back.
It's been a minute. Like we were talking right before the show got started. Stephen, you've been on the show a couple of times, and Ben, you're joining us for the first time, which is great. So
yeah, thanks, guys.
Absolutely. So one of the things we got in store for tonight's episode is we're going to be talking little predictions.
Right.
This is one of the things that I like to do before the season starts, right before opening days. Kind of the rosters have been set. The teams are heading to their destinations, whether they're playing opening at home or away. And so we kind of want to set the tone for the season. This is going to be the first time that we're opening on time. We all remember last season where things got shut down right in the middle of spring training, and we didn't see baseball again until July. But now everything's back on time. The guys and teams seem to be healthy. We haven't heard any issues yet. So let's talk some baseball. Let's go ahead and jump into it. We're going to start in the National League West because the Los Angeles Dodgers are the defending World Series champions coming out of that division, and they look to be poised to repeat, especially with a lot of key acquisitions that they have made this offseason. So I'm just going to kind of just throw it out there. So who do you all think is going to take this division? Because the Dodgers are going to be the team to beat. The Padres got extremely better. The Giants look like they're kind of starting to turn the corner. And then, of course, you've got the Rockies and the Diamondbacks as well to kind of finish out. So I'm just going to throw it out there. Steven, if you want to jump in, go first. Who do you think is going to take this division?
Definitely. So I look at, you got the Los Angeles Dodgers, as you mentioned, defending World Series champs. Mookie Betts on the huge deal. Pitching rotation so deep that they just put a Cy Young Award winner and David Price in the bullpen. And my gut is telling me it's the San Diego Padres. I am all on board. I love the moves. They're aggressive. They still have a pretty good farm system. This is a team that's willing to make a deal at the deadline. I think there might be a little bit of maybe a post-pandemic World Series hangover in LA, and I think the Padres managed to hold on.
Wow. What do you think, Ben?
Interesting. I should confess my little bias. I wrote all the Dodger stuff last year for Overtime Heroics. So, but I can be objective, and I'm still not sold on the Padres just yet. Although I would say after reading a recent article on Fangraphs about their rotation, to upgrade and get Darvish, and then to add, even when they added Clevenger last year before the deadline and he was hurt, and then you add Blake Snell, and then you could still have Clevenger come back. I mean, that's a scary rotation. I am, watching the Dodgers last year, obviously with Walker Buehler and Kershaw, and then you see what else, and then they add Bauer. The Dodgers really made one move while the Padres made a bunch in their rotation, right? And so I'm still sold on the Dodgers winning that division. A lot of the stuff that I had read said it's the Dodgers division, but the Padres are going to give them a serious run for their money. Now, if there's injuries to either team, who knows? I think it's still a year. I wish you could look in the future and see what happened by the end of the season.
Right.
Because that might be a better telling thing. If we're sitting there this time next year with roughly the same teams in place, you might think differently.
Right. And one of the things you mentioned, Stephen, was the fact that David Price is not going to be in the rotation. That's an expensive bullpen arm that they're going to use as a long reliever. And then not to mention you've got Trevor Bauer who comes in, and he's not even your number one ace who's making $40 million a year. It just kind of there's a lot of things that I guess they're kind of going outside the norm. and especially with the bullpen and the rotation. But the Padres are I think are going to be the team to beat. Like you
It could
mentioned,
be.
yeah, like you mentioned, Ben, Mike Clevenger is going to be out this year, but they've
Yeah.
got him coming back. And then they've got this rotation set up for the next 2 to 3 years with Snell and Darvish under control. It's just one of those things.
And it's even with that, this is still a team that has Lamet, they have Musgrove. I see Chris Paddock as a huge bounce back guy. People forget this is still a kid in terms of being in the major leagues. Like for me, I mean, this division is going to be a dogfight. I think we absolutely all agree that. I don't necessarily see any of the other three teams really making an impact, at least for the division. But yeah, I mean, for me, this Padres team is really on the rise, and I'm excited to see what they do.
I agree. And, just because I covered the Dodgers last year and I follow the NL West, I try to be open, and realistic to things that can happen. And if we do get the full 162 game season like we're going to get, I just wonder how some of the things that happened with the Dodgers last year, how they'll translate over 162 games. And you can say that about any team as well. That really, you saw some stats and you saw a season last season where 60 games might be, a decent indicator of a part of a season, but that was the whole season. And I just wonder sometimes when you look back to even 2019, where there was a full season and we didn't know anything about COVID, if that's a better predictor sometimes too of what teams are going to do.
Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, it's just, I think the Dodgers they proved it last year, and you look at some of the stats, but it was only 60 games. And the previous years, even 2017 and 2018, they couldn't pull it off.
Well, and I think that, that speaks to another point. I mean, it is so hard to win a World Series. I mean, to this, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but still the last repeat World Series champion was the Yankee three-peat at the turn of the millennium.
That's right.
For me, I just look like so much goes into winning a World Series. And you have a team like the Dodgers that lost in the World Series, upset by the Nationals in the first round, finally breaks through. I'm curious what that just kind of emotional toll is going to be coming into the season, where it's like you did finally get there. Maybe do they take their foot off the pedal just a little bit that allows Slam Diego to come storming out the gate?
Well, and you've got to recognize all the money that San Diego put into Tatis Jr., right?
Yep.
And I mean, when they signed Machado a couple years ago, I was like, why? I mean, they signed with a huge deal and he didn't start that well. Now it kind of makes more sense. It's just that division really, I think, is a 2-horse race.
Well, and what I love what San Diego did, I know we got to jump to the next division, but what I absolutely love what San Diego did is this is a team that had a really good minor league. They looked around saying, hey, we've got guys that are close. We are going to be a good team soon. Yeah. Let's bring in that high-profile veteran to start giving them a taste of winning right away. So Tatis...
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, so Tatis, all he knows is how to win. He is a winner. Winning leads to more wins. It builds energy. It builds confidence. I think it was a very smart roster build.
Yeah,
one of the things... see how much he bat flips, too.
I think he's got that down. I think we're going to see some unique ones this season. But I mean, to bring up the Tatis signing real quick, a lot of people don't know is that signing doesn't kick in until 2024.
Okay,
because they took his arbitration years
in terms of new money.
Right. So basically, they still have room to play if they need to build it and bring in an extra key piece or two before his contract goes into effect, and where he's making $24 million a year.
Well,
go ahead.
I was saying, and I mean, that's exactly what we saw them do, this offseason. So they know we're going to be paying Tatis a lot of money. Darvish's contract runs out in 2023. So here you go. You just brought in I think he finished second in the Cy Young voting, maybe third. Incredible season last year for the Cubs. All of a sudden, now you have Darvish at the top of this already great rotation. Incredible.
And then you got Blake Snell.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then
And let's hope he doesn't get pulled out of a World Series this time.
I think we're all still frustrated with that. I think we all knew that he should have stayed in there, but the West is gonna be fun, that's for sure, especially with these two teams, the Dodgers and the Padres.
I think so.
So we'll kind of stay out west, and we'll kind of jump into the American League now, because this is going to be a division that I think it's going to be a 2-horse race, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think, and I'm not being biased because I'm an Astros rider, and my team is the Astros. But when we look at these teams on paper, it's either going to be between the Astros or the Athletics. It's just how it's been the last few seasons. I mean, you've got the Angels and the best player in baseball that don't really seem to do a whole lot as far as bringing key pieces. I mean, of course, they did bring in Anthony Rendon a couple of seasons ago.
Yep.
But
no pitchers.
No pitching. I mean,
well, that's the thing, right? And I was just gonna say, sorry to interrupt you, Jeff, with my time with Overtime Rooks, covering the Angels, and they're my team that I cover. I try to write articles that are be objective and accurate. And I think the only thing I would say maybe about that rotation is because of COVID, because of what's happening, maybe they're not willing to take any long-term risks. I'm not defending them, but it's a broken record with the Angels about lack of pitching, right? I mean, the way they claimed Bundy last year from the Orioles, and then he had his season, and then a lot of people say, well, it's still a shortened season. It's not. Let's see what he does over 100. Well, he's not going to start 162 games, but with a projected amount of starts, he had like 12 last year. So what does he get over a full season, even if there's injuries or not? So, if they finish third, maybe.
So
if they don't.
So Ben, let me ask you this.
Sure, go ahead.
The Angels had the opportunity to pick up Garrett Cole after the 2019 season.
Yeah.
And they passed. They had a chance to pick up Trevor Bauer after the 2020 season. They passed. So in your opinion, what do you think is the reason why they passed over those two high-profile pitchers?
Good question. I'm not really sure I have a great answer. I know what I've read. Social media, conjecture, rumors that Artie Moreno doesn't want to spend money on pitching. I would say to the Angels' defense, with their 2020 top draft pick, Reed Detmers, there's somebody, and also with Chris Rodriguez, but those are guys that are still technically prospects, right? Rodriguez would come out as a bullpen guy this year potentially. I don't know what's going to happen with Detmers. I don't know why they don't spend money on pitching. I don't know if it's what I've read. It's an owner bias. If it's, just the way they are. But they've gone the route. Manassian's gone the route of getting Alex Cobb,
Right.
Quintana. They haven't spent a lot of money on those guys. And, I'm trying to remember how much of the salary the Orioles are eating on Cobb, right? So the moves look like a lot of fans say they're not addressing their pitching needs, or they're just low risk moves because of the times.
I think that's a good point. And I can also look at it and say, like, all right, so let's say you take Garrett Cole out of the Bronx and you put him, into Anaheim, down in, Anaheim Angels for me. But they probably don't sign Rendon as a result.
Nope.
And that team, I don't know if they're much better than they've been. Like, this to me isn't a team that's really just one or two players away. No. And it's unfortunate because, you have the best player in the world in Mike Trout. But what we've seen is that, baseball and maybe hockey are really the only two sports where having the best player doesn't actually translate to success.
Right.
Like, you look at, Patrick Mahomes just won a Super Bowl runner-up, best player in the NFL. You look at LeBron, he rings in the finals every year. Connor McDavid in Edmonton's having an amazing career that's just being wasted. But, you look at Mike Trout, this is a guy that, I think people forget that a successful hitter in baseball is getting a hit 30% of the time. That's a success. You do that for your career, you're borderline Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So much more has to go right that, I look at Garrett Cole or, even in more recent years, Zach Wheeler, Patrick Corbin, they need a lot of guys. I would really say they need like two really good pitchers and probably three before I really see them battling with Oakland or Houston.
Yeah, and I think Bundy, you sometimes wonder, the Fangraphs article I read ranked the top 15 staffs, right? And you wonder if Bundy's like, I mean, he was a top prospect when he was drafted by the Orioles. Is Bundy like a number 3 guy on a really good rotation? Right?
Right.
Andrew Heaney is like Andrew Heaney's 29 years old. There's been injuries. He had above 4 ERA last year. Canning is still young. He's only 24. Quintana, and they got Cobb, and they got Bundy. So it's kind of an interesting rotation. I think you're right, Steven. You know, I don't know, even with your original question about them, like why don't they sign pitchers, right?
Right.
Like,
Well, and,
why?
and for me, it's, I always love to reference this to football terms, but for me, they are the equivalent now of like the Miami Dolphins for years. It's they're too close to fully rebuild.
Yeah.
So they keep tricking themselves that we're just 1 or 2 signings away. So they bring in Ohtani, they bring in Rendon.
Yeah.
And then they aren't actually winning any more games because it's a deeper roster issue. And that you can only do so much at the top to kind of hide all of your holes and weaknesses. But so, I mean, with that said, when I look at the AL West, the one team that to me is the opposite of the Angels, it's the Oakland A's.
Right.
And that's why I'm picking Oakland to edge out Houston for that division. And it's not even necessarily what has Oakland done or who has Oakland brought in. It's more who Houston lost. So, for me, right. I look at question marks around pitching. Obviously, Verlander is a huge miss at the top of that rotation. Altuve's just a year older. I love Jose Altuve. I think he's a great player. At some point, he's not getting better. He's only going to start kind of slipping a little bit each year, which is unfortunate, but, just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, that's what happens, right?
And it's just, I look at, okay, so you lost Springer. Correa could be on the way out. I still think there's going to get a deal done there, but, who knows? I like the certainty of the Oakland system better than the Dusty Baker system in Houston.
Okay. See,
interesting.
Yeah. I have a theory on what the Astros are going to do with Correa, and I honestly think that what's going to happen is they're going to let him walk after this season. And what's going to happen is they've got 2, maybe 3 young prospects that can come in and fill in at the shortstop position that they could use, and it'll be cost effective. And then they're going to go out and either try to re-sign Verlander or Greinke.
Greinke's getting up there too, though. So is Verlander. But I mean, Greinke over his career, when you think about the guy that he is. And, they signed Lance.
They got Lance McCullers
Jr., right? That big contract.
Yeah, that was a good move.
Yeah, 5 years, $85 million. So they've got him locked up.
Yeah.
I think Verlander wants to pitch after he recovers. He's got it in him. I think he's going to owe the Astros and basically get a 1-year deal out of them so he can come back and pitch. And then we may see him, either ride off into the sunset or head back to another team or wherever he wants to do. But that's what I think is what they're going to do, because if the Astros haven't signed Correa yet, and here we are basically on the eve of opening day and no deal is done, same with Francisco Lindor as well, that we're going to see him walk, and the Astros are going to try to either re-sign Verlander or Greinke, one of those 2, just to a 1-year deal, just so they can kind of keep the pitching staff somewhat together with these young guys that they have coming up through the wings. So that's what I think will probably happen.
Well, I love that we brought up Lance McCullers Jr. To just backtrack the tiniest bit, the Angels need guys like Lance McCullers Jr.
Yep.
They need that 5-year, $85 million type player. That's just a good pitcher. Yeah, like he's probably not going to win Cy Youngs. Maybe we'll make an All-Star game potentially. But they're guys that are going to get you, like 14 wins a year. They're going to get you 30 starts, and they're going to pitch to a sub-4 ERA. It's exactly how you build a winning baseball team.
Well, maybe they hope a guy like Quintana does that.
And we'll see. Bounce back candidate.
He needs a free agent, I think, after this year. I don't know if it's arbitration.
No. So he just signed a 1-year deal.
Oh, did he? Okay. Yep. I think the Angels are counting on Chris Rodriguez and Reed Detmers as well. But that's not like guys like you're mentioning, Steven, that are like proven starters, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how the West, especially with both the NL and AL, how they both kind of match up. Two high profile divisions that's always exciting to see. But now we'll kind of shift gears and kind of jump into the Central. We'll kind of touch on the NL
No
Central.
man's land.
Yeah, we'll kind of jump into the NL Central first because we had one team that got a high profile player for next to nothing, which is the St. Louis Cardinals. And the way I see this Central Division shaping out in the National League is I see the Cardinals are going to kind of still keep that trend of staying on top. Of course, they got the Cubs in there that are going to try to make some noise. I mean, they did, obviously traded away Yu Darvish, like we just mentioned about. But what are your thoughts on the Cardinals and how you think they're going to do? Steven, I'll go and jump to you first.
Yeah, absolutely. So NL Central to me is the most just fascinating division. So as you mentioned, like it really seems like it's probably the Cardinals to lose at this point. Pittsburgh, I'm sorry, I just apologize to that entire city. Cincinnati looks like they're probably taking a little bit of a step backwards. Losing Bauer, a little bit of transition there. I think the Cubs, my bold prediction is that both Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo are traded this year. That's my bold prediction. I think they're blowing that thing up. Baez might be traded too on top of that. Which really just leaves Milwaukee and St. Louis. Now, Christian Yelich had a terrible year last year. That's not going to happen again. He's going to be much better this year. He'll be back to maybe not quite MVP status, but he'll be pretty close. I drafted him in fantasy, so I might be hoping more than I know, but we'll find out. But yeah, so like you look at the Cardinals, this is a team that, people didn't realize Paul Goldschmidt was a really solid player last year. Yeah, he's no longer one of the top 3, top 5 first basemen in baseball. He's still a really good player. On top of that, Nolan Arenado is a really good baseball player. You look at the leadership that this team gets from Molina. I do think there's a couple question marks with their pitching. I do like Flaherty kind of sitting at the top of that rotation. I just kind of look and, it's a team that's kind of there every year. Again, we mentioned it with San Diego that this team just knows how to win now. Now, granted, San Diego's new to that scene where St. Louis is just always winning.
Right.
I really just don't see a way that they're not sitting at the top of that division unless there's some major regression. If Nolan can't hit out of Colorado, Goldschmidt looks 10 years older, and maybe Flaherty gets hurt. But outside of that, it's the Cardinals to lose.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Ben, what do you think? How do you think the Central will fare?
That's an interesting one. And, I remember doing some articles in 2019 for a sports site I mentioned and was writing on Yelich versus Bellinger. And so I really want to see what Milwaukee can do with Yelich. A full season, returning to MVP status. We saw how the Brewers played against the Dodgers last year in the playoffs. You see what the Cubs are going to do. You saw the offer that Chris Bryant was given. Like Steven said, does that mean his time in Chicago is done? One comment I read on Twitter is someone said that the offer to Bryant was an insult.
Right.
So it's like, okay. So the Cardinals, they made the big deal with the Rockies. I don't know. It's a tougher division to predict. It's a strange division. I mean, you've got Pittsburgh. Are they going to lose more than 100 games? Probably. They're probably going to be one of the worst teams in baseball, along with the Orioles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cincinnati, they lose Bauer. I think it comes down to the Brewers and the Cardinals, and I think the Cubs are third.
Okay.
Well, and the thing that I love about the Cubs is they've really got an opportunity right now to completely blow up how baseball rebuilds happen. Usually we see teams just really go, really in the gutter for a long time. Not to pick on Rip over here, but the Astros, before that they were a World Series caliber team. Those were some rough years.
Right.
And you look at what the Red Sox is happening there now. You look at, Philly had some bad years. Baltimore has, been terrible for a while.
Mm-hmm.
right now, the Cubs, and remember, this is a GM and Jed Hoyer, who is Theo Epstein's guy. This is, he replaced Epstein at the head. This is a guy that kind of thinks the same way, and Epstein was very much a Moneyball guy. Look at how the Cubs built for their 2016 championship. Right beforehand, they were terrible.
Right.
They traded, their ace was Jeff Samardzija. I remember there was the 1 year he lost his first 8 starts, but pitched to a 2.5 ERA. And then he beat the Yankees and was his first win. And that was the first time I was at a Cubs game. I was like, this is bizarre.
Nice.
And it was Tanaka's first loss in the United States. So that was a fun little game. But, you look at that team, and so they get rid of Samardzija and they brought in Addison Russell and Dexter Fowler. Well, they win a World Series, and both of those guys were integral parts of that team. Now, obviously, the career for Addison Russell has really gone off the rails. Dexter Fowler is pretty much an afterthought at this point. But this team understands that to get better, you kind of have to blow it up. And they've got the opportunity. They've got Rizzo, who's 32 in a contract year. He's not going to get better. You look at Chris Bryant, his MVP day, that looks like he's probably never getting back to that form, but people are still interested because he's a good third baseman. And you look at a guy like Javi Baez or Wilson Contreras behind the dish, and all of a sudden there's pieces there that you're going to get some of the best prospects in baseball. And we could be sitting here 3 years from now with the Cubs, going towards the NL pennant saying, wow, they really, they did it the right way.
Right.
We'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? It's sort of like the Blue Jays 2015 season and what they did in the playoffs, and same with 2016, and then they blew it up. And I, follow the Jays because I live in Canada, but I remember how angry people were at Atkins and Shapiro, and they blew up a lot of that team and those players that were on that Blue Jays team. And then look at where they are now. Right. I mean, we'll get to the AL East, but sort of the same thing.
And while those at home are thinking about kind of what Toronto did, and again, we'll get there. Think about Baltimore was a playoff team right around that same time too.
That's right.
So keep that in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
In terms of a rebuild.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Baltimore's not going to be bad forever either.
No. We'll kind of jump into the AL Central here in just a minute, but you kind of look at the Kansas City Royals as well. They kind of came out of the woodworks back in 2014 when they finally broke through and actually made the postseason and got as far as they did. And of course, they went and won it all in 2015. But just to kind of use that as an example with these teams that tend to just blow it up and kind of just send everybody to trade, get prospects back, and kind of you got to tear it down and build it back up if you want to be able to contend. And we've seen teams do that before. So it's a definite possibility for the Cubs to go back out and do that as well in a couple of years. So
I think it is.
I think that's the way we're going to see teams start to do it now, especially with a lot of the analytics that take over of the game. We're going to see teams just, I don't want to necessarily say that they're going to tank and to get prospects and draft picks and whatnot. But, that's what we're starting to see, and we're seeing teams do that. So,
yeah.
But the Central, the NL Central it's definitely going to be. I think it's the Cardinals to lose. But we'll kind of jump on over to the American League side of things.
So real quick though, last thing for the NL Central. So real quick, think about you're the Cubs. You're sitting there. You're not really pushing for the playoffs. You're right around the trade deadline. Eric Hosmer out in San Diego is having kind of one of his other Eric Hosmer years where he's either kind of good or just kind of bad. And all of a sudden, you can do a trade. Do you send Anthony Rizzo for Eric Hosmer and Mackenzie Gore? What about some of those other names at the top of that Padres rotation? Padres are pushing for a World Series, and if they've got a shot to go for it, they seem like the team that's going to do it. And now all of a sudden, you're the Cubs. You just got rid of an expiring contract on a guy that already kind of took a discount the last time around, is going to be looking to be paid, and probably is going to go elsewhere to be in a more competitive situation. Now, all of a sudden, you get a top-line 22-year-old pitcher. Right. That's what I mean. This is such a crucial opportunity for the Cubs. There's probably, I would say there's more pressure on them this year than just about any other team in baseball.
That's interesting, considering how Mackenzie Gore is such a top prospect within the Padres.
Yep.
And they rave about him. But if it's a World Series or bust type season, you might have to just go all in.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I mean, interesting to see. You know, the trade deadline's come. It's. I mean, lots to talk about when that time frame comes. But I want to jump to the AL Central because, you know, the Cubs. I'm not the Cubs. See, I'm back on the National League still. The White Sox.
White Sox.
I'm going to the South side now. So the White Sox definitely got better. The Twins are still. They were able to re-sign Nelson Cruz, so that's a crucial part of that lineup there. Between these two teams, we've got one that's young and hungry, and we've got one that's a little bit more experienced with some postseason. Who takes this AL Central? Ben, I'll go ahead and jump to you.
Yeah, I've been researching that because I'm writing this preview for the Angels White Sox season opener, and I have to go with the White Sox. You know, I know they made it in last year. They stumbled to get into the playoffs. They lost. They got rid of their manager in Renteria, which I'm still surprised at. I brought in Tony La Russa. You know, but they have like an MVP caliber season out of Abreu. It's a full season this year. He's made it pretty clear what their goal is in Chicago. I've read about the World Series or bust thing. You know, they made the Lance Lynn move from Texas. They have Dallas Keuchel as well. Lucas Giolito as well. He threw a no-hitter last year. The Sox have been bad for a while, like we've talked about in previous few years, right? And then they've got all these players coming up. The Twins, you know, they did well last year, but then they got to the playoffs and they choked. They didn't even win a game.
Right.
And I was like, oh. So, you know, and then 2 years ago, they set that massive home run record. You know, so it's really Chicago's to lose. We've seen a changing of the guard from a couple years ago in the AL Central with Cleveland, right? I mean, Cleveland takes a step back. You know, it seems to be the White Sox to me.
So I'll throw my challenge flag.
Go for it.
If we were 1 week ago,
Yeah,
I absolutely agree.
Oh,
Absolutely agree. And then Eloy Jimenez tries to rob a home run.
Yes.
4 to 6 months injury timeline. To me, he was the one guy they could not lose. Now, granted, he's probably not good enough that he should be playing in the outfield on a daily basis. Fielding is a little bit more of an adventure for him. They could not afford to lose his bat. This was a guy that was, upper 280s type hitter. I think over the course of a season, 30 to 40 home runs, 110 RBIs. Where I think, and I love Jose Abreu, absolutely love him. I've had him in fantasy for like each of the past 4 years. Last year was a fluke. He's going to start returning to earth. He's a prime regression candidate. His batting average and balls in play was through the roof. He's not young. You know, I forget how old he is offhand, 34, 35. So I think he's a regression candidate. I did like the trade for Lance Lynn. I'm not super sold on him as this like perennial Cy Young candidate that this late in his career. Where when I look at Minnesota, I just look at, it's a really just well-rounded roster. I think their starting pitching is okay. I think Maeda is a prime regression candidate as well, but I think Barrios takes a step forward, and finally develops to being that true ace. And again, I just kind of look at a team that, they know how to win. They keep getting close and they kind of keep falling apart by the end. I just don't think Chicago's going to have the long-term firepower to knock them off this year. Next year with Jimenez back, I think it's their division. But I think we're still 1 year away. Yeah,
and then you've got basically Cleveland, who takes a serious step back, and you got Detroit and Kansas City. Now, Kansas City made interesting moves in the offseason, right? Good. I mean, they claimed, or they got Benintendi from Boston. The Tigers are terrible.
Tigers are going to have a really interesting decision this year, though, and who are they taking at the top of the draft?
Yeah,
because I believe they're picking one, and there's 2 kids down in Vanderbilt right now that I don't know how you can decide between them.
Gosh,
well, the Tigers brought in Hinch, right, from Houston.
They did.
Yeah.
I don't know what he has to work with.
And they picked Spencer Torkelson, 1 overall last year. Hey, that kid's going to be great. Like you
Yep.
can just the way he looks like a baseball player. Now, granted, they said the same thing about Billy Beane, and I'm sure we've all watched Moneyball. But
Right.
you
Yeah,
know,
we
like this
also had
kid
Archibald player.
looks like he's going to be the real deal. This is a team that's not bringing in AJ Hinch if they don't think we're 3 years away from being a serious
Yeah,
team.
of course. I mean, maybe they think with Hinch's experience. How long was he in Houston for before? I'm trying to remember. Sorry.
He came in 2014. I want to.
Okay.
I believe so.
That was
Okay.
because I don't recall who the manager was previous.
Yeah, I'm just
but
thinking maybe the Tigers think that the way he entered in Houston is going to be the same thing in Detroit.
That was Bo Powell. Bo Porter was the
okay.
previous one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hinch has got a good way of working with young guys. That they given. I mean, it helps that he was a former player and throughout his career, so he kind of can relate to a lot of these young guys. I mean, even we saw the article the other day that Miguel Cabrera, came out and said with ESPN that Hinch is a good guy. He's a good baseball. He's good as far as baseball knowledge. So I think we're gonna see him get a lot of productivity out of these young guys in Detroit, and they're still young. They're still a couple years away, but I think, like you mentioned, Steven, with those Torkelson coming in, they've got a couple young guys as far as pitchers like Casey Mize. They brought in Julio Teheran as well to kind of help get some veteran presence in that rotation. But I think we're going to see the Tigers kind of start to, progress slowly, but they are a team that we can definitely keep an eye on in the next couple of years. So
Interesting. I know you mentioned that Teheran, and the thing is, like, his season for the Angels last year, covering the Angels, was a disaster.
Yeah.
A plus 10 a 10 plus ERA. I don't even know if he won a game. I mean, I'm not saying he's a bad pitcher. I just, it's I think maybe a nice moment in Detroit is to see what Cabrera does to end out his career, right? I mean, I'm trying to remember when I looked at how many home runs he's away from 500.
He was getting close.
Yeah.
He's
Right.
getting close to
So
500
there's some
home runs. He's
special
getting close to
moments
3,000
for him.
hits. Yeah.
Even though the team is not great, right? Kansas City, the same thing. I mean, they won the World Series in 2015, but it seems a long time ago now, considering where they're at. Again, it's almost like a two-team division, right? It's basically the Twins and the White Sox. Stevens made a good point about Jimenez not being there.
Yeah.
Cleveland is kind of
Cleveland.
Right?
They're rebuilding.
But like what they did, like they lost Lindor, and they, I don't know, gone are the glory years of a couple years ago, right?
They're a smart team though, because like I look back, and I know we got to jump to the NL East here in a sec, but I look back, they had CeCe Sabathia, they had Cliff Lee, and now they got rid of both of them, and it really wasn't that long of a period of time. And the next thing you know, they've got Carrasco, they've got Trevor Bauer, Corey Kluber wins his Cy Youngs, and now they've got Shane Bieber and I can never pronounce his last name, Zach Plesac. That all of a sudden, this team, I mean, they're kind of rebuilding the right way. Cleveland's not, a major market, but, they came a game for a World Series. And to be honest, their farm system's not bad. They'll be back sooner than later.
It'll be interesting to see how Terry Francona manages this team going forward now. So,
absolutely.
I'm sorry, Ben, what were you going to say?
No, I was looking at this thing on Fangraphs, and I mean, they rank Cleveland 15th.
Yeah.
In terms of power rankings for starting rotations. Shane Bieber and then Zach Plesac.
But I also look, they just got
go ahead,
additional depth with the Lindor trade in terms of minor league depth. They've just got, prospects back from San Diego for Clevenger. I remember Cal Quantrill at one point was supposed to be a starter. And they've got, they got some prospects back from Cincinnati that, this team found a way to kind of retool their system, while still playing competitive baseball. And, again, being a small market, all the power to them.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Absolutely. So we'll kind of keep going on, and let's jump to the East now. We've got 2 more divisions to cover real quick, and let's jump into the National League East. This is going to be a fun one. I think we're going to have a good race because we just don't know who's actually could possibly. Well, I think we know who will take the top spot, but there's 4 teams that could vie for first place in the division. And I have to go with the Braves on this. I think the Braves are going to be the team that are finally going to get over that hurdle. We've seen them come so close to last season to making it to a World Series for the first time since the late 90s. And they just didn't have enough in the tank to overcome the Dodgers, who came back and won it. But, the Braves to have a couple young, good phenoms in this rotation, in this lineup that can definitely bring in a lot of offensive run production. Pitching wise is going to be great. They've got a couple young guys. So, Steven, let me jump to you. How do you feel about the National League East?
So National League East to me comes down to 2 teams. You hit the nail right on the head that it's gonna most likely be the Braves. I keep seeing all these, different reports and different rumors, different stories. The Braves didn't really lose anybody. This was already a really, really good team, and now they're just slightly older. And this isn't like, some like Miguel Cabrera, Albert Pujols aging. Ronald Acuna Jr. is 23, 24? This is a guy that is just starting now to enter his prime. You have Ozzie Albies at second, is a really good player. They did lose Nick Markakis, a little bit of a veteran presence out in the outfield, but again, I don't know how much he was really contributing last year. To me, it's most likely I almost said the Angels, most likely the Atlanta Braves. But I don't want to say sleeper team because again, we kind of mentioned that there's, at least 4 teams, if honestly not 5 teams in contention. Right. With the Marlins making the playoffs last year. For me, the team to watch out for is the Philadelphia Phillies. I'm not buying into the Mets hype. I think they're a really good team. It kind of seems like it might topple at any point. Like it just seems, they love Cohen. Now all of a sudden there's issues with him and, GameStop of all things. It just seems like it's a little bit of a circus over there. That I look at the Phillies, and most importantly, I look at Joe Girardi now having a bullpen. This is a team that Aaron Nola has ace potential. I think he could take that next step. Zach Wheeler is a really, really good pitcher. Eflin is, he's another good young arm entering into his prime. And it's a good lineup. Rhys Hoskins, Bryce Harper was fantastic last year, but everybody kind of forgot about that because the team, failed to make the playoffs. This is a team, I'm not sleeping on Philadelphia. I think they're a lot closer than people are giving them credit for.
So who's near the bottom? And if you like Atlanta, Philadelphia, maybe the Mets, does that leave the Nationals?
Yeah, I think the Marlins and the Nationals are probably fighting for kind of the bottom of that division. But again, this is a division that the worst team probably is winning 75 games. Maybe 72, a little bit lower. I look at the Marlins, they're going to be good. I think with a lot of the young teams that kind of snuck into the playoffs and the expanded postseason last year kind of got close, 60 games helps. It's easier to kind of hit a hot streak and start getting confidence. 162 games is a grind. And that's why we've seen teams, like Toronto, while they're trying to come up and they're going to be good. And everybody knows that 2019, they just ran out of steam. That it's you kind of, until you're there playing every day, you're just not used to that kind of like grueling, demanding heat. And then for Washington, they won their World Series. They're pretty clearly, I think, in free fall at this point. They keep trying to do some changes to stay, competitive or, trying to get back. I just, Scherzer's another year older. Strasburg's another year older. Strasburg has injury concerns. I think we're more likely to see Scherzer traded this year than we are to see Washington win that division.
Yeah, and I mean, we mentioned with the Angels, Rendon left after 2019. What happened to Howie Kendrick? Did he retire?
Yeah, he's done now.
Yeah.
So there's little pieces here and there. Rendon was a big piece.
And that was it. So then, so you bring in Starlin Castro. Starlin Castro is a fine Major League Baseball player. Starlin Castro is not Anthony Rendon. Like, how are you replacing that production? Yes, Juan Soto's getting better. He's getting older. He's going to be a superstar player in this league. But I just start kind of looking around and just saying, Mike Trout's a really great baseball player. Mike Trout has not won a playoff game, and he's only been there once.
Yep.
Takes more than one guy.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the other pieces that have left the Nationals since that World Series. And I mean, it was a substantially different season after that World Series because of COVID.
Well, and even with that, I mean, remember, this was the Nationals team. They were the wild card team, and I think they were the second wild card team that won the play-in game. This wasn't a team that was like this great, this great club that, like the Dodgers, you can really see it as a dynasty. This was, hey, they got hot at the right time.
Yeah.
And, props to them. And, they get all the credit for it. Absolutely. That, they got to the top and they won the World Series. It's hard when you don't already have that lineup built.
I see what you're saying, Steven. It happens in other sports. It happens in the NHL. Sometimes two teams get hot and they win a World Series. But when you think about what the Dodgers have done, or even what the Padres have done, or the Yankees, or I'm trying to think who else recently in baseball, you're right. Certain teams have like this thing where I don't know if they lose for a while, or if they have a good farm system, and you're right. They're set up to win for several years.
Yep.
Right. And they're kind of always close, or they're like the Dodgers, or, I'm thinking of the Dodgers in the last like 3 to 5 years. Right. Whereas Washington's had one shot and that's it.
Absolutely. And I mean, for Washington's sake, they were pretty good right before that. Their World Series almost seemed like that book was shutting, and all of a sudden they snuck in a World Series right at the very end. Where, when you look at like a Dodgers or a Houston, or where we thought the Cubs were in 2016, where it's like these teams look like they're really built for competitive play. And it's
for many seasons.
And again, it's hard to win another World Series. It's, baseball has the fewest teams that make the playoffs. You have the worst percentage. And I always like to point back to the 2008 Phillies as like my perfect example. They won the World Series in 2008. They lost it in 2009, lost in the NLCS in 2010, lost in the Division Series in 2011. I think they were the wild card team in 2012, 2013. They missed the playoffs. It was just a perfect step down every single year.
Yep.
But when you keep trying to run it back with those same guys, or you won the World Series, so you extended a bunch of contracts, it's hard to get back to the top as you're currently built.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it is.
Like you mentioned, earlier, that we haven't seen a team repeat since the Yankees did it back in the late 90s and early 2000s. I mean, I don't know if we will ever see a team repeat. Not saying that it's not possible, because it definitely is possible. It's just in this day and age, I don't think it'll ever happen. But I've been wrong before. So, but the East is always gonna be fun, because you just don't know which team is going to actually come out on top, because all of them are great. Especially with their lineups 1 through 9, and pitching and bullpens and all that key stuff that you need to be effective. So it's going to be interesting to see how this division fares out, especially with the Mets, bringing in Francisco Lindor is going to be something that we're going to keep an eye on. Whether or not, they do extend him is still to be determined. We don't know that, but they did bring in him. They brought in James McCann to kind of help with the catching situation. Pitching, Carlos Carrasco, Noah Syndergaard will hopefully be back some point this season after he recovers from his Tommy John. But I like the East. The East is going to be fun. I'm not going to be biased or anything, but I like it. So it'll make for fun baseball, that's for sure. So we'll kind of round out the last division we have to cover is the American League East, and I'm going to have to go with your Yankees, Steven.
I kind of look at, the roster that's built in New York is clearly built to win now. It's from Judge to LeMahieu to, you saw what Stan could do in the postseason. Gary Sanchez was terrible last year, and this team, still was a problem. Yeah, on top of that, you add in Cole. Kluber was great in in spring training. Taillon, fantastic in spring training. Tampa takes a step back. Toronto has some injury concerns and no pitching. I just don't see a situation where the Yankees don't win it. Now, I'm not saying that it can't happen, but I feel pretty confident that this is going to be the least interesting division.
I wonder with the Yankees, though, about their injury issues, especially like 2 seasons ago, the amount of injuries they had. You know, Judge, is he going to play a full season? Like, can he recapture to like 2017? You know, like, I'm not saying I don't like the Yankees to win it. It's just, you know, and I can confess my bias as a Jays fan, being a Canadian, but
you can
you know,
see
I'm also a
the path
realist.
to them not winning it.
Right, but you're right about the Jays pitching, and the Yankees. Who I just don't know about their pitching after Cole. I mean, I've done research on it, right? Like Cole is just like without question.
Yeah, so I mean, it's
Like
Cole
guy.
Cole's your ace. He's going to pitch every 5 days. I mean, after that, so Kluber had like a sub-2 ERA in spring. Averaged a strikeout per inning. Like he looks, as long as he's healthy, that he's going to be a good like kind of number 2 option.
Mm-hmm.
The guy to watch in the Yankee rotation is going to be that Jamison Taillon. They traded for him from Pittsburgh. We've seen a lot of Pittsburgh guys leave Pittsburgh and really start, you know, embracing like their true potential. Now he's also recovering from his second Tommy John, and he also had a bout of, I think, testicular cancer in there.
Yes.
So there's, you know, definitely some health concerns around him. But again, sub-2 ERA this spring. Outside of that, it's coming up from the system. They've got Domingo Germán is back in the rotation after his just terrible suspension for domestic abuse.
Right.
And then Jordan Montgomery. But we did see a really interesting question that I want to point to that came in from Craig James about where do the Rays end up in the East?
Oh, I didn't see that. Thank you.
This to me is, again, I mentioned it earlier with the Cubs. This is a team that just gets it. I think they'll probably finish 3rd in the East this year. I think they can compete for 2nd, maybe even the division. This is the best farm system in baseball. And a team that already has really good talent in the majors already. And that talent's young. Like they traded Blake Snell and got better in their minors. And it, you know, in a minor league, that's already the best. They've got Brandon, I believe his last name's Lowe, Lowe. I can never pronounce it. Thank you.
Yeah.
This kid's going to hit like 30 home runs as a second baseman. Wander Franco is going to play short, and he's going to be like the next like Fernando Tatis in this league, or next Francisco Lindor. Like this is a team that really just understands how to build and how to be successful. The one thing that I am just hoping, praying, shouting to the baseball gods, please build this team a nice stadium in Tampa. They deserve it. Their fans are passionate. They love the game. We see what the Lightning fan base can do. There's rabid sport fans down there. Build them the stadium they deserve.
Well, there's talk. I remember, was it last year or the year before? Since you're wearing the Expo shirt, they talked about the Rays are going to play some of their games in Montreal, just because of you know how abysmal it's Tropicana Field, right? It's just like, you know, there's people making jokes even about the amount of fans allowed into the stadium because of COVID, and it's like, well, the Rays are going to allow 100% of fans into the stadium to start the season. I'm like, oh yeah, that's more. It's almost like that's more than the 5,000 that are normally there.
It's so unfortunate. So it's like, you know, the stadium's in St. Petersburg. It's not in Tampa. It's like on the like wrong side of a bridge. That's like one lane that sits in rush hour traffic.
Oh.
Like this is an area that, like, if you want to put baseball in cities where it might be a little bit harder to get fans, either be it smaller cities or cities like Miami, where there's just a lot more that you can do besides baseball, you've got to give fans the chance. Like you have to give the team an opportunity to succeed in the market. We know that Tampa can put a great product on the field. Get them a great stadium. They deserve it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
If the Athletics can go into stadium talks, then the Rays can do that as well.
Absolutely.
So that's but Ben, I want to get one more thought from you on the Blue Jays real quick. They brought in George Springer. They brought in Marcus Stroman. Or no, not Marcus Stroman. Marcus Semien.
Marcus Semien, yeah.
They still have a good young core in Vlad Jr., Kevin Biggio, Bo Bichette. What is the kind of the buzz kind of around Canada that is it positive for the Blue Jays, or is it one of those things that it's to be determined?
I think it's positive. I think it's really, really hard because of where they're starting the season in Florida. And it's just because of COVID, they're not going to be in Toronto to start the season at the Rogers Center. I think people are excited about those moves. They realize who and what George Springer is. but it's that young core. And we're not just talking about those three players as well with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., with Kevin Biggio, and with Bo Bichette. It's also Teoscar Hernandez. It's also Lourdes Gurriel Jr. There's some other pieces there as well. But with their starting rotation beyond Rue, it's like it's anybody's guess, right?
Right.
I mean, I think that something that I read said that basically that young core of those three players that I mentioned now at least has some supporting cast in Springer, right? Being one of them. And what Springer brings,
And I look Springer to Toronto as what Machado, being a more expensive version, was to San Diego.
That's
it's
a good
guy
point.
that knows how to win.
Yep. Yeah, and I think Atkins and Shapiro are pretty smart. And I know, like I said earlier in our time, how mad people were when they blew that team up after 2015 and 2016. Well, look where they are now. I mean, they had 3 seasons of, well, 2.5 really because of the pandemic, but where they were really bad. But I've seen some pieces come into Toronto, and I really like Hernandez as well. Like Teoscar Hernandez, he won a Silver Slugger last year. A guy with a lot of potential. There's a lot of pieces there. It's not just Springer, Seaman, and the 3 young guys, right?
Well, and there's always been talk, can Toronto be a destination? Toronto is like an A-class world city. It's a fantastic place. It feels very modern despite being a pretty old city for North America.
Yep.
But, you look at Springer choosing to go there. You look at, Marcus Semien deciding to go there. You look at the pitcher, Robbie Ray, re-signing, staying in Toronto. Toronto has the infrastructure in place in terms of both as a city and a location, as well as a team and a roster. It's a destination again. And,
I agree. I agree.
Absolutely. And I look at in the next couple of years, I'm curious to see the moves that they bring in, but I think they're a lot closer, and I won't be shocked if in a couple of years, if it's Toronto and Tampa battling for the division and the Yankees always just trying to kind of crawl into the mix like we're seeing the Cubs now.
Yeah, it's a good point you make, Stephen, because I think with the moves that they did with Springer and Semien, it's like it's the start of a series of moves to support that young core that we've talked about, Bichette, Guerrero Jr., and Biggio. And Springer and Semien are a part of that, in addition to whatever else they decide to do in the next couple of seasons.
Absolutely.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see how everything kind of plays into, especially when you've got Marcus Semien for 1 year at $18 million. I think he's going to be. I mean, that's a pretty hefty price tag for a 1 year deal. I think he's going to be playing second base now.
Yeah, he's playing second base in spring training anyway.
So we'll see how everything kind of plays out with the Blue Jays. I think they're on the right track. It's just going to be one of those things we're going to see, how everything kind of plays. Hopefully they can get back into Canada and actually playing at the Rogers Center, because I know that's where we're going to see a lot of the team kind of come into shape is when they get back into the
of course. I mean, to have to play in Buffalo last year with COVID, and then start the season in Dunedin in their spring training facility, and they're professional baseball players, but it must have an effect on that team, right? To not be in your home city.
What I always think, and now granted, I didn't even get close to playing any professional sport, but I gotta imagine there's something about, you're in your city and you're going to the game and you're seeing people wearing your name on their back. You're seeing Blue Jay hats, you're seeing people wearing blue going towards, the Rogers Center. In Florida, you're not seeing that. You're not turning around and being that guy's wearing a Guerrero shirt and I'm Vlad Guerrero Jr. No, that's just not happening. Where I think once they're back in Toronto and it's just there's a different energy when you're really at your home, in your home base. I think this is a team again. It's an electric team. It's an electric city, and I'm really curious to see what this year looks like. And I'm really, really curious over the next 3 years, do they take that next step in terms of a legitimate World Series contender?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that young core is a big part of it.
It's definitely going to be exciting to see how everything pans out, how this American League East does. The Yankees are probably going to be the team to beat. You've got the Red Sox in there that, we might be heading towards rebuild, but we just, they're the Red Sox. So we'll kind of just leave it at that. So, but we're kind of about out of time for this episode. So I appreciate you guys coming on, talking a little baseball, kind of seeing how the season's going to fare. So just real quick, we'll give you guys a quick plug. Ben, we'll start with you. Where can everybody find you at?
I put down there, Able Marketing is my company based in Canada. I do writing and marketing for people. You can find me on Twitter at Lebaneb, Lebaneb. It's basically Ben Able spelled backwards.
Okay.
As my Twitter account spelled backwards. You can find me on LinkedIn as Ben Able. Happy to connect with people to talk baseball. Writer for Overtime Heroics covering the Angels. But, a general baseball enthusiast. I'm going to be watching the season. And, we've covered a lot of stuff tonight, guys. And, I'm really willing to watch and follow a lot of different stories throughout the season just to see what pans out. Are we going to make a World Series prediction?
On the spot, who do you got?
Yeah, real quick.
Oh, boy, a tough one. I'm still going to have to go with Dodgers and the Yankees, I'd say, in the World Series.
Okay.
Awesome. And again, I'm Steven Leonardi. You can find me at S and then my last name, LeoNardi11. I also add MLBFA01 for the Major League Baseball Fan Association, bringing the fans a voice into the game. My World Series prediction is, I've got the Yankees over the Braves in the World Series. We're going to have a repeat of those late 90s classics. And I'll go over to Rip for his final prediction.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I keep going back and forth on who I would want to actually be in the World Series, but I have a feeling it's going to be I'm going to go Dodgers Yankees. It's tough.
You didn't want to say Yankees. You could see the pain.
It pains me to say it, but hey.
Well, Houston might have a chance too, though.
As
Maybe
much
they make
as I
at
want
least
to be,
the AL championship.
If they can make it to 5 consecutive straight ALCS championships bursts, that's pretty phenomenal within itself right there. But
it is.
It's going to be interesting to see how the season pans out. So, guys, I truly appreciate you coming on, talking some baseball. It's opening day. Hey, so we've got some baseball on tap. So, be sure to go out and watch your teams. And I'm just happy to have baseball back. So
absolutely.
Yeah, a normal season of baseball.
Absolutely.
So that's going to do it for this episode, guys. Be sure to tune in to or subscribe to the show on wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Google, or Spotify. And the show is part of the Podcast City Network, so you can catch all the amazing podcasts on there. And one last little tidbit for the show. The show has a phone number. You can go and you can call into the show, leave me a voicemail. If you want to talk baseball, that number is 210-263-3253. So that's going to do it for this episode, guys. I appreciate it. Y'all take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Rip Griffin Show. Make sure to subscribe to the show on all the major podcast platforms. Follow Rip on Twitter at RipGriffin2.